Hey everybody, this is Michael here with another installment. Cannabis of history. Good old Martin Booth, may rest in peace in heaven's cannabis fields close by. Chapter 7. This is part 10. Oh my goodness. Chapter 7, we'll get right into it. Okay? I haven't looked ahead, and I read this book 14, 15 years ago, 12 years. I don't even know. It's been over, it's been a little while. At least 12. And I'm not reading ahead. So, A la mode du hashish. Chapter title. By 1820, interest in the exotic Orient was widespread. Chinese porcelain, silks, and brocades were the height of fashion. Persian carpets adorned the floors, and Indian tapestries the walls of the great houses of Europe, whilst Chinese and Japanese craftsmen were manufacturing items specifically for Western markets. All these tastes came together in what is arguably the most bizarre and tasteless building in Britain, the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, built in the South Hindu tradition with onion-shaped domes and Chinese wall paintings. With such fascination in foreign climes and cultures, it is hardly surprising there were those whose interest extended to cannabis. The first British painter to sketch the monuments of ancient Egypt was David Roberts, a self-taught artist from Edinburgh, who went to Cairo in 1838 to paint and draw, but became fascinated by the street scenes and life of the people. Of one picture, the coffee shop, he noted, the visitors, in quotes, the visitors generally bring their own pipes and tobacco, but an intoxicating preparation of hemp is often smoked and can be obtained in the low coffee shops. When even taciturn Turks and Arabs become excited and boisterous in these coffee shops, it is due chiefly to the intoxicating fumes of this preparation of hemp. Close quote. Yet it was not artists who brought a focus to bear on cannabis, but writers. At the turn of the 18th century, many writers turned to opium to boost their creative imagination. Some discovered it and became addicted to it through its medicinal use, but there were others who, not needing its pain-killing properties, took it to bend sensation and give themselves a new literary vision. The drug was to have a considerable effect upon European literature. Known as the Romantics, and writing mostly between 1775 and 1835, these authors rejected previous literary convention and concentrated upon the importance of the imagination. Some of the greatest writers in European literature fell under opium's spell. Woodworth, Pushkin, Coleridge, Shelley, Goethe, Keats, Byron, and Scott, to name but a few. Yeah. Some were to pay the heavy price of opiate addiction and come to wonder if there might not be another drug which was not so cruelly habit-forming At the forefront of the drug-taking writers was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Addicted to opium when still a young man, he was not averse to experimenting with other drugs, partly in the vain hope that he might substitute one for opium. Amongst his circle of addicted friends was Dr. Thomas Lovell Beddoes, a physician for whom drugs were of hedonistic as well as professional interest. Based in Bristol, where he ran the Pneumatic Institution in the fashionable area of Clifton, a clinic for respiratory and other illnesses in which patients inhaled various gases as a cure, Beddoes gathered about him others who shared his interest. Apart from Coleridge, these included the young Humphrey Davy, later the discoverer of sodium, Thomas Wedgwood, son of Josiah Wedgwood, the famous potter and inventor of silver nitrate photographic paper, who financed the institution, and Thomas de Quincey. Whilst employed by Beddoes, Davy discovered laughing gas, it's nitrous oxide, which the doctor used to treat melancholia. Beddoes and his friends took nitrous oxide as an entertainment. Wedgwood, a sick man who died at the age of 34 and who took drugs not only for pleasure but also in an eternal search for improved health, became curious about bang. He approached Coleridge, who on February 17, 1803, wrote to him, quote, "Last night I received a 4-ounce parcel letter by post." And this is 1803. On opening it, it contained a parcel, a small one, of bang from Perkis. We will have a fair trial of bang. Do bring down some of the hyoscyamin pills, and I will give you a fair trial of opium, henbane, and nepenthe. By the by, I always considered Homer's account of the nepenthe as a banging lie. Close quote. He's something else. This interest in cannabis and other drugs might have remained within Beddoes' circle were it not for Thomas de Quincey, the prodigal son of a wealthy Manchester mercantile family who ran away from home, lived in poverty in London with a prostitute, then accepted back by his family, went up to Worcester College, Oxford, with the intention of becoming, as he would have it, the intellectual benefactor of mankind. Quotes from him, I guess. Whilst a student, he was prescribed laudanum. That's opium dissolved in fortified wine. It's like heroin, but not as strong, in a liquid form, for a bout of neuralgia, and became addicted to it. In 1822, at the age of 36, De Quincey published his autobiographical Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Confessions of an English Opium Eater, which had appeared serialized in the London Magazine the year before. The book immediately drew considerable attention, going into detail about the effects of opium on the imagination and the considerable and terrible consequences of addiction. For the first time, the effects and dangers of narcotics were broadcast widely to become a major matter for discussion at every level of society. When De Quincey was 60, still addicted to opium. He was given a sample of Bang. And from previous parts and chapters in the series, you should know what that is. It's cannabis. It's cannabis. Okay. It was almost certainly not his first encounter with cannabis. There's the next sentence. Beddoes had investigated it decades earlier, having obtained some hashish from a contact overseas at a time when De Quincey was involved with him in Bristol. The elderly De Quincey now decided, to conduct his own experiments on cannabis with the intention of writing another controversial book. But his plan never came to fruition. However, across the English Channel in France, there was an elite of writers who were using hashish. Like their British counterparts, they were seeking not only to stimulate the imagination, but also to find the subconscious source of emotion, which they were convinced was only viewed in dreams. The key to this inner world, they believed, was psychoactive drugs. And when they wrote about their experiences, they did so in great and intricate detail. That said, there must be a caveat attached to their writing about cannabis, for it was not uncommon for it to be taken in a drug cocktail. Okay, so that's important because, these guys are, mixing it up, saying, but it was part of it, right? But I feel like these particular ones they're talking about, it might have done that. But there were people in the later times, possibly than that did take it just it. Okay, so we'll get to that probably later on in this book, right? So for now, okay. Lord, where in the world was I? Sorry. Okay, we're okay. Yeah. So, additionally, it has to be borne in mind that these were writers in revolt against the mores of their time, right, and intent on talking up the effects of what they considered was a new and wondrous way to arouse the creative mind. Nevertheless, their reports served a purpose, for they were the first true cannabis experimenters who looked both subjectively and objectively at it, their opinions forming those still prevalent 1.5 centuries later. Okay, yeah. I'll just put a little asterisk there and say, writers and people that recorded their experiences, but that doesn't mean they were the first. Okay. At all, and even in that category is the first. But we're going along with him, okay? I don't want to be too combative with the author here, but just adding that in there. Just, think about history is it's not concrete, okay? Like anything is, right? So keep that in mind. You look both. So, okay, the French writers referred to themselves as Le Club des Hachachines, the Hashish Eaters Club. Experiments with cannabis in France centered upon a psychologist, Dr. Jacques-Joseph Moreau, sometimes known as Moreau de Tours, a student of Jean Esquirol, one of the early founders of psychiatry. Okay, Moreau was fascinated by mental illness and hallucination, having had a nervous breakdown himself. He thought that if the cause of hallucination could be identified, then mental illness could be treated. But this could only be done if he could experience what his patients underwent. To this end, he took hashish, which he obtained during a journey to the Middle East and North Africa in the 1830s. In 1841, he commenced treating mental patients with hashish at l'Hôpital de Bicêtre on the southern outskirts of Paris. A former prison, by now an asylum cum hospital, which has the dubious reputation of being the place where the guillotine was invented. 4 years later, he published his findings in a book entitled Of Hashish and Mental Derangement, stating that hashish calmed his subjects, helped them to sleep, suppressed their headaches, and increased their appetites. From this, he deduced that mental illness was caused not by brain damage, but malfunction, a concept that flew in the face of contemporary perceived medical thought. Of eating hashish himself, Moreau wrote that it produced a great sense of true happiness, a euphoria akin to receiving joyful tidings. Yet he needed to be objective in his observations, so in the pursuit of scientific progress, he became hashish supplier to the members of Paris literary and artistic circles who were willing to try it, having heard of his experiments. The first writer he contacted was a friend, Théophile Gautier. We're talking major names here, folks. We're top of the list on where they were, where they are. I mean, well, their writings, Goodness. Was born. So Gautier, Pierre Jules Théophile Gautier was born at Tarbes in 1811, or Tarbes in 1811. By the age of 25, he was both famous and infamous, his notoriety stemming from his novel Mademoiselle de Maupin. It told the story of a transvestite, but it was the preface that established Gautier's reputation. In it, he praised those who sought new pleasures, who were willing to take risks in the chase for enjoyment. And he declared the manifesto for the French Romantics, which has echoed down the centuries: art for art's sake. With Moreau, Gautier passed the word about hashish throughout Bohemian Paris, and Le Club de Hashishins came into being. So their club came into being, at that time. The date of its foundation is uncertain, of course, but it was around 1843. Maybe a year or two this way or that, whatever. It's a club of hashish eaters. Come on, y'all. Oh man, and very smart, man, and women too. Anyway, we might get into that too. So yeah, very notable figures. The club members met every month in an apartment rented by one of their number. The painter Fernand Boissard de Boisdenier at the Hotel Pimodon on the Ile Saint Louis, originally built in 1657 by Antonin Nompard de Caumont, the Comte de Lauzine. Sorry. It had been a great... I have a little fun with the names, It had been a great, no disrespect or anything, It had been a grand mansion at the center of the early 18th century Parisian social whirl, but had by this time been subdivided into apartments. Gautier occupied part of the attic. Quite a character. It was probably quite an addict, too, I bet. For a while, the poet Charles Baudelaire rented an apartment adjacent to Boisdeniers, into which one could gain access through a secret staircase. Cool. The room in which the club convened had a door hung with a velvet curtain, the walls paneled and covered in discolored gold leaf, the decorated ceilings domed, while the Pyrenean red and white flecked marble mantelpiece bore a clock in the shape of an elephant with a castellated howdah on its back. The furniture was dated and covered with faded tapestries. The hashish was served in oriental porcelain dishes, handed out by Moreau from a crystal glass vase container. In every respect, the setting had an air of genteel decadence. In addition to Gautier and de Boisdenier, the membership included at various times the writers Gerard de Nerval, Charles Baudelaire, Victor Hugo, and Honoré de Balzac, and the painter Honoré Victorin Daumier. It is thought that the artist Eugène Delacroix and Alexandre Dumas, the author of The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo, may also have been occasional visitors. Okay. Occasional. Okay. If they were visiting at all, they're part of this club, y'all. Just saying. It was a private club of these people. Occasional visitors to the exclusive club of world-renowned writers and artists. Okay. Even in their time, they were world-renowned, right? They're already world famous when they were alive, this group. An informal association. Members drifted in and out. Well, of course, that's convenient. And of course it would be, because it's loose and more liberal, liberated, They was just going to come and go, It's like a bathhouse or something instead of a country club, But, yeah. I'd prefer the bathhouse myself. Anyway, so there you go. Never been much on the country club scene. No, I don't like clubs very much. Anyway, back to it. Okay. So it was informal. Okay. Some remained regular attenders. Others stayed only a short while. Okay. Gautier himself was a member for only a year or so, withdrawing because he believed a genuine writer did not require artificial stimuli to fire his imagination. Interesting. So he went against it, Not all the members imbibed hashish. Gautier wrote of Baudelaire that he tried hashish a few times as a physiological experiment, but made no regular use of it. Finding it repellent that one could buy one's happiness from a pharmacist. Let's see. Baudelaire himself declared he only attended as an observer, although he was later to write of his hashish experience. And yeah, experiences. Oh, he's a quiet writer. I'll look up his writings. I have another book that has a lot of his direct quoted writings in it. Something very good. I really like his stuff. Charles Baudelaire. Okay. So, Gautier wrote of Baudelaire that he tried hashish a few times as a physiological experiment, but made no regular use of it, finding it repellent that one could buy one's happiness from a pharmacist. Baudelaire himself declared he only attended as an observer, although he was later to write of his hashish experiences. Similarly, Balzac preferred to observe, but in time he succumbed to his curiosity. That's probably how it went with a lot of. Writing in a letter to his lover, Eveline Hanska, on December 23rd, 1845, that he had at last eaten some hashish and heard divine voices as well as seen heavenly visions. The members ate hashish as dawamesk. Green in color, it was a spread or jam which Moreau obtained from North Africa, made of hashish, almond paste, pistachio nuts, sugar, orange, or tamarind peel, cloves, and other spices. On occasion, cantharidin, powdered, which is powdered and desiccated blister beetles, Lita vesicatoria, more commonly known as Spanish fly, okay, was added as a sexual stimulant. It was usually taken with a meal, straight from a spoon or smeared on biscuits or bread. Once consumed and the main courses of the meal over, the members lay back on cushions and waited for the drug to take effect. Afterwards, they discussed their experiences, comparing them to those of other drugs, and such as opiates, and considering how their imaginations had been affected. As with many drug users, there was a bond of camaraderie between them. But this was further joined by their political, social, and artistic ideals, which were to considerably impact upon French 19th century thinking. Yet their contribution to society extends beyond their art. They were the first to objectively and often dispassionately record the effects of hashish. Through their writing, especially that of Gautier and Baudelaire, they brought a great awareness of cannabis to Europe. This was not done with any altruistic intent. Gautier knew the public were fascinated by the East and drugs, and by writing about them, he would gain a larger readership. Surprisingly, the snowball of interest was set rolling not by a member of the club, but by an outsider. In 1843, a book entitled Le Hash, which is hashish, was published anonymously. It was a commercial success, being reissued 5 years later as Révolution politique et sociale, de 1848, under the author's name Claude Francois Lallemand, a neuropathologist. He was the first person to study the functions of the frontal lobes of the brain, linking them to the power of speech. The book, a curious volume since described as a utopian anarchic narrative, proposed a new social and intellectual order. supposedly translated from an Arabic manuscript the author found in his cabin when sailing to Marseille. It starts with a dinner party at which a doctor, returning from Egypt and Ethiopia, passes hashish round to his fellow guests, who then fall to talking about a political utopia. How does he do that sometimes? Might be why one of the reasons why it's still freaking illegal. The government doesn't like it very much because of its potential on how it could affect society, and that it could be a threat to them. To they, right? The top of the pyramid here in the world. Anyway, y'all know what I'm talking about. Not the good pyramid in Egypt, not the other one. Anyway, we're moving on. Yeah. Sorry. Supposedly translated from an Arabic manuscript. Okay, Marseille, start. Okay, sorry. Yeah, Arabic manuscript. The author found in his cabin, when he was sailing to Marseille. It starts with a dinner party at which a doctor returning from Egypt and Ethiopia passes the hashish around. I already read it. Go back. Anyway. The basis of the argument is that hashish can give a sort of prophetic intimation of what the future might hold. It may be that Gautier was influenced to write about hashish by reading L'Allemande. His first piece on the drug was published on July 10th, 1843, in a newspaper for which he was the theater critic. It was a brief article which described the effects of hashish, outlining the hallucinatory effects and discussing what is now referred to as synesthesia, the admixture of senses. Gautier wrote of seeing sounds and hearing color. Encouraged by the response of his readership, and no doubt the success of L'Allemande's book, Gautier wrote further on the subject. In 1845, he wrote an addendum for Moreau's Of Hashish and Mental Derangement, expanding it later that year into a longer story, the now famous Les Clubs des Hashishins, published in La Revue des Deux Mondes in February 1846. It was in this story that Gautier was to write of the wonders of hashish. I was quotes. Okay, quote. Gautier, Théophile Gautier, quote. I was experiencing, he reported, a complete transposition of taste. The water I was drinking seemed to have the savor of the most exquisite wine. The meat turned to raspberries in my mouth, and vice versa. I could not have told a cutlet from a peach. He was later to add, quote, after several minutes, a general lack of sensation spread through me. My body seemed to be dissolved and transparent. Within my chest, I clearly saw the hashish I had eaten, like an emerald giving off millions of tiny sparks. My eyelashes grew ever longer without stopping, and, like gold thread, rolled up on small ivory spinning wheels, revolving completely alone with stunning speed. All around me, flowed and rolled multicolored precious stones. In space, flower patterns divided ceaselessly as if in a kaleidoscope. At certain moments, I saw my comrades again, but distorted. They seemed as half men, half plants, with the pensive air of an ibis, standing on an ostrich's foot, beating their wings. So strange was this, I was convulsed with laughter. I began to toss my pillows into the air, catching them, throwing them round and round with the alacrity of an Indian juggler. Close quote for a minute. For all his elation, however, Gautier also issued a warning. Before eating hashish, he opined, it was, quote, most important to be in a good disposition, both in body and mind, to be in luxurious and well-appointed rooms. In such conditions, it is probable, almost certain, that naturally agreeable surroundings will change into bliss, rapture, ecstasy, indescribable delight. But without these precautions, ecstasy may readily turn into nightmare, he says. Gautier's writing style was deliberately journalistic. That of his fellow hashish chronicler, Charles Pierre Baudelaire, was, if still tending towards the literary, more to the point. And yeah, man, I guess that's why I like him more. And, Baudelaire. I'm going a little bit. Born in Paris in 1821, Baudelaire had an unsettling childhood. His mother was a fervent Christian with the conviction of original sin and divine retribution. His father dying when he was 6, he resented his stepfather, a soldier and strict disciplinarian, when he kicked against the traces and entered the world of Bohemian Paris. Baudelaire's parents packed him off to India. It is possible he dabbled in cannabis and opium whilst abroad, but on his return in 1842, he moved into the Hotel Pimodon, where within 2 years he was a member of the Hashish Eaters Club. Intense, pensive, and serious, he was in many respects a tragic figure, as was to show in his poetry, but he was also intrigued by the possibilities of altering states of consciousness by imaginative or chemical means. It was in 1851 that Baudelaire published an essay on wine and hashish, in which he was critical of the latter, stating that wine exalted a man's will, whilst hashish destroyed it. Wine bringing joy, but hashish isolation. Wine he regarded as part of French culture, whilst hashish was alien, and he considered Moreau to be little better than an evil pusher, nothing more than a pimp for cannabis. In summary, Baudelaire believed wine to be the better stimulant to creativity. 7 years later, his literary reputation made with the publication of his collection of verse, Les Fleurs du Mal, The Flowers of Evil, Baudelaire published a lengthy article in La Revue Contemporaire, which was later reissued in Les Paradis Artificiels. It was a powerful diatribe against intoxication as a means for seeking heightened states of consciousness, condemning those who use drugs for vicarious as opposed to analgesic reasons, and reducing them to little more than vagrant drunks in the gutter. He was writing this from first-hand experience. An alcoholic, Baudelaire was enslaved to opium, which he had first taken to address a stomach complaint. Certainly, his attitude towards drugs was biased by his own negative view of his personal addiction and the depression he frequently felt as a result of it. But he was nevertheless disparaging of those who felt they had to rely upon artificial means. Artificial, really? Natural, man. Anyway, nothing artificial about nature. Artificial means to get in touch with their true selves, emotions, or imagination. Baudelaire's description of the effects of hashish was impartial and accurate. At first, okay, we're getting into his quotes here, so I'll say quote unquote, okay? Baudelaire. Quote, at first, hilarity, ridiculous, and irresistible seizes you. This seizure of groundless gaiety, of which you are almost ashamed, occurs over and over, cutting through intervals of stupor when you vainly try to recollect yourself. Recollect yourself. After a short time of quietude comes a cool sensation in the extremities, close quote, which could be so cold as to turn into a thinking, quote, thinking piece of ice, close quote. And next came lassitude and a weakness in one's limbs. One's hands would not move, the mind becoming filled with anxiety. Soon after this, the senses became more acute, and hallucination followed, in which shapes of surrounding objects distorted and, in italics, sounds put on colors, and colors contain music. It sometimes happens that personality disappears, he says, and objectivity, the property of pantheist poets, develops so abnormally in you that your contemplation of exterior objects makes you forget your own existence. And soon you confuse yourself with them. The imagination became turbulent. Finally, the eater grew resigned and in some cases slept. The following day, the body was gripped by fatigue to such an extent that Baudelaire recommended one did not attempt to take hashish unless one had nothing pressing to do. It's funny. As Gautier had remarked, and as De Quincey did when writing about opium, Baudelaire noted that the effect of hashish depended upon the individual's psychological state. It did not present anything new, but enhanced whatever already existed, good or bad. Comparing opium to hashish, he said the former, opium, was a peaceful seducer, and the latter a chaotic devil. Oh my, Baudelaire. Baudelaire's writing on hashish. Gautier was to remark after his death in 1867 how accurate his descriptions had been, reinforcing the understanding that hashish did not create ideas, but merely reworked those which already existed in the mind. Yet there is some doubt about what Baudelaire was actually taking. That kind of matters. That he's basing all that on whatever he was taking, right? Might not have been all good old cannabis. He was taking. So, maybe a bit unfair, But boy, was he a writer, okay? And he was right about certain aspects of it. Yeah. Okay. Some doubt about what Baudelaire was actually taking. In his 1851 essay, he was to record that hashish is made from a decoction of Indian hemp, butter, and a small amount of opium. Mm. Mm-mm. Not supposed to be in there, And that's quotes from him. It has also been mooted that Baudelaire was perhaps not as experienced a hashish eater as he would have his readers believe. There is reason to think that he read a doctoral thesis on hashish. Hashish, an historical, chemical, and physiological study written in 1848 by Edmond de Courtive, borrowing facts from it. He also used notes taken whilst talking to other hashish users. The work of Baron Sylvester de Sacy and a pharmacopoeia from which he copied extracts word for word. Well, then, there you go. Yeah, something else. Despite these reservations, Baudelaire's hashish writing is considered a vitally important addition to the literature of drugs. That he was neither an advocate of hashish nor a regular user of it is overlooked. Those who would attack hashish have used Baudelaire's general decline as indicative of its insidious evil. But that is misrepresentative. Baudelaire was a tragic figure from early in his life, an opium-addicted alcoholic. He was a failed suicide, filled with self-loathing, who regarded himself as a failure. His death, on August 31st of 1867, was caused not by drugs, but by the degeneration of his brain caused by syphilis, which he had contracted as a young man. So he had had it all those years. Of course, that would have an effect on the man all throughout, and as it got worse. Because that was a bad one back then. It's what took Alexander the Great out way before this period that we're discussing here. Anyway, wow. But yeah, but he was quite a writer. And that's the most vital part of this, I think. Or applicable part of him, of his story. A third member of Le Club des Hachishins also added to the corpus of hashish literature, Gerard de Nerval, the pseudonym of Gerard Labruni, a close friend of Gautier's from their time in school together, was the son of an army doctor. His mother died when he was 2, and he was raised by relatives in the country, only returning to live with his father in Paris when he was 12. At the age of 20, he translated Goethe's Faust, Faust, which was to be the basis for Berlioz's opera La Damnation de Faust. after a failed love affair with an actress and her subsequent death. He went to the Levant, writing as a result, Voyage to the Orient. Appearing as a serial in La Revue des Deux Mondes before being published in a single volume, it was not only a travel book, but also a study of the society, history, mythology, and religion of the region. Interesting. In the book, de Narval wrote an allegorical hashish story about a caliph with a double life. The implication being that the man's hashish use prevented him from separating fantasy from reality. He was further to record the effects of hashish eating in much the same tenor as Baudelaire and Gautier. A mystical Freemason, de Narval additionally studied the history of the assassins and Sufism. Go back to previous videos, previous chapters, and those are included in those groups. To which Freemasons believe. So you study the history of the assassins and Sufism, to which Freemasons believe their organization was linked. Alarming his brethren by publishing facts about the master builder, Hiram, essential figure in Masonic ritual, but at the same time augmenting his knowledge of hashish. Hiram Abiff was the man's name. And the Freemasons truly believe the man lived and was the master mason of the Temple of Solomon. And he built it. So I guess what they would call you had the Temple of David was wooden and textiles, fabrics, and plated gold on wood, and more like a tent. Okay, the first temple was like more of a tent, a mobile tent, where you could break it down and take it and put it somewhere else. That's what it was. Refer back to Abraham and the nomadic lifestyle that he had. And they lived in tents, So the first temple was like a tent, but it had wood and it was gilded, and there was rooms divided with canvas and all this. Okay, but it was meant to be able to be mobile. Interesting, huh? Not in any one place. But then you had the Temple of Solomon, and that was David's son. And I guess you would call that the second temple. I'm not sure. But it was the first one that it was set in place as a, stone temple. And that stone temple, Hiram Abiff, was the master mason, and it's very important to the Freemasons. And that story, it's like a central part of the lore. Okay, and how he was killed, and how he was betrayed, and it was around 900 to 1000 BC. That's my dating. Because from what I know, that was around David into Solomon's time. It might have been around 900 BC, maybe a little after. As you go into 850 BC, something like that. But no, probably around 900 from what we know. Because we know David was around 1,000, a little more recent than that. Okay, and then his son Solomon. Okay, and that was during Solomon's reign that Hiram Abiff was the master mason. So there's just a whole lot around that, and I think a lot of people that haven't looked into Freemasonry like I have in the past and read about it don't know about that, and how crucial that is to the whole thing, their whole thing, how it ties back to that temple and the master mason that was building that temple. But as he was building it, and I think as he was about to complete it, or it was completed, or I'm not exactly sure, it either was almost completed or was, that's when he was betrayed by his workers. There was I don't know exactly, I forget. I read a whole book about it one time years ago, but it eludes me now. But very important, and you can look into it yourself. There's a lot of that. Yeah, Freemasonry, the old secret club and all that, and they try to be secret, have secrets, but there's so much information about them out there. It's all, so much is leaked out and been written books about, and come on. But there are. I don't doubt that there's a few things that haven't come out yet about them, about what they believe, and there's a lot of things wrong, I think. But no, not all of them are the same. There's different groups, there's different ones, and the individuals. It's all an individual thing. You can go in and not know what you're getting into and be a good man and get tied in with some nefarious people that are already in there, or on the reverse, that you have a nefarious person that warms all of them over and wins them over, and the older men of the club, of the temple or whatever, and the lodge, and then he gets in. And so that's how it is. There's corruption, people. There's corruption in every institution. There's corruption in every college. There's corruption. It goes up and down the gamut. But, then you have degrees of corruption, because what is corrupted matters, and its importance, significance, and its power, it's on its own. And so if something like that gets corrupted, oh my, right? So you have that. You have elements of corruption in just about every institution, or every one. And even the nonprofits. And the churches. Okay? None of them are exempt from that. Corruption is everywhere. It's like a virus that gets into every government, every corporation. But see, you have to remember, there's more well-intentioned people, more well-intentioned souls. I believe in every institution, any institution. You have individual people within that thing, that entity, that are good, and they want to do good, and they want to have a positive impact on the world, and they believe in some ethos of that company or that government or whatever, that church, and so you have more good than bad, okay, in everywhere, and that helps keep things stable, I guess, in a way. Because without that majority of the good-natured and good-willed, within those otherwise corrupt entities. Um, Without those good ones, you would have those institutions completely corrupted, and they would completely take it over. And I think in some cases they have been successful at that. Some institutions, some corporations, some governments, but not all. And even if they have won the day in some places, it doesn't mean they'll keep it. It doesn't mean they'll keep their win, because things change. Even if you're dealing with a company, say, that's 100 years old, all those ones this generation are going to be gone one day, and then you'll have a new one come in, and we'll see if they copy the ones from before or do something different. Be better, That's what I hope for. As we move through time, that things go on an upward spiral instead of a downward one. But every now and then, you have to accept that, yeah, we'll have a downward for a time. It's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean you keep going down. It can flip, it can change, and then you'll go up again. And you always got to remember that. Yeah. So we're going to stop it there. We'll mark. I guess I'll have to use my pen. I'll just make a tiny little mark where we were. Okay. Interesting, huh? Yeah. So we're more than halfway through chapter 7. We'll be on chapter 8 next. But next video we'll finish chapter 7, and we'll get into chapter 8 probably in that video, and it'll be called, chapter 8's title is The Pastor's Son from Poughkeepsie. So we go from the French world, the French connection, over to Poughkeepsie. Okay, the next one. It's interesting. And I hope y'all learn things and realize things about certain time periods. These people back in the 1830s and 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, think about what we just read. I'm busy. Creative, though, too. The people we were talking about there, and how they influenced thought, and they influenced later on both the negative propaganda against cannabis. Some of their writings did that and helped that, but then others were much more fair and neutral, like it said about Baudelaire's. But those parts were tended to be overlooked back in the early 20th century. And the negative parts were emphasized. So that shows you how our great artists of the past, their work and what they produced, what they expressed, what they conveyed, can be twisted, can be distorted, can be outright censored too sometimes. And that's why this book is important. That's why the study of cannabis hemp is so important. because it will connect you to your roots, your past, the history that we know is connected to that plant. We wouldn't be in a society, we wouldn't even have a civilization at all without that plant. Every government of the world should be thanking cannabis every day for where they are and what they have. Every government. Because without, the advent of agrarian life, going from the hunter-gatherers, that whole idea, even though I think we've gone up and down, and I think there's agriculture before the last period of hunter-gatherers. So it's gone in and out, and we've gone up and down, and it's humanity's history and story is far longer than what our current anthropologists and archaeologists think or say or teach. And we have a roughly 200,000 year history of humanity, being a human being here on earth in a human being body, even if it was before Homo sapien. Okay? Yeah, some of anthropology, I think, has found some things. It is based on bones and the things right from the ground. So, but it's how we go about putting the pieces together like a puzzle. You draw out a puzzle piece. Yeah, it's a puzzle piece. You got it. And you can learn from that singular puzzle piece. But you've got to be able to connect the pieces together in as accurate way as you can. And that's where I think our modern sciences fail a lot more than what most people realize. And, a lot of them are grasping at straws. And they're trying to keep their straws together even though their straws are coming apart every day. Yeah, so that's another thing. But then there's new discoveries and new insights all the time. So it's a very exciting, interesting time to be a person that's interested in our more ancient past. That's my girly dream in there. She does that sometimes. Well, I'm going to end it there. It's long enough. And we'll get into the rest of chapter 7 in the next video. Y'all have a nice evening. And may we see our cannabis plant legal one day in this country. It should have never been made otherwise. In the supposed land of the free. What a shame. What a shame. And what disrespect. What a slap in the face to it. For all it did for us as a country at the beginning, as in other chapters previous that we talked about. And we'll probably get into that more too as well later on and on and on. So, good night. See you in another one.